What's up, and welcome back to Interpreting the Stars, where today we are doing yet another ranking video. This time we're looking at, of course, the massive Star Wars universe of films, and I will be ranking each movie from worst to best. Now, remember, there are a couple of ties in this list, so I'm starting off at 8th place, but I will be talking about all 11 films released thus far. Then after that, I will rank each trilogy from worst to best, and if we have any more time, I might also take a look at what won in each scoring category, such as people, writing, behind the scenes, entertainment, stuff like that. So let's get cracking. In 8th place, also known as last place at 72%, is our first tie between Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, and Solo, A Star Wars Story. Now, I can have a lot of different opinions when it comes down to this universe as a whole. I often see things a lot differently than most, but this is one of the few things that I think I can agree with most people. Remember, the score is 72%, which is far from a bad score. It's actually a rather decent score, but in comparison to other Star Wars movies, you'll see it's significantly lower than those, which is the point I'm trying to make. Neither of these movies are bad, but when you're talking about Star Wars, you're looking for specific things. I'm not going to talk so much about Jar Jar or other things that people don't like about Phantom Menace. What I will talk about is the plot itself, which kind of isn't that exciting. It had to do something with taxation and regulation of space flight, which in general is kind of boring in comparison to some of the other things that Star Wars does. As far as Solo goes, just like Indiana Jones, Han Solo is synonymous with Harrison Ford. They essentially have a symbiotic relationship. Harrison Ford is Han Solo, and anyone attempting to also be Han Solo comes off as, at most, a fair cosplay attempt. I wasn't a huge fan of any of the characters in this either. I didn't care for Woody Harrelson's character, the Spider Monkey character thing, or anybody really. Again, not a bad movie, but nothing I care to ever see again. In 7th place, jumping up to 86%, is Attack of the Clones. Look, at that score, 86%. In second to last place and up, every movie will have this high of a score and higher. That's how much I like Star Wars. Attack of the Clones is a movie that I really like, but one of the most important storylines of the film is the romance between Anakin and Padme, and I despise everything about it. It was light and fluffy and just not what you come to expect out of a Star Wars movie. I know it needed to happen, but couldn't it have happened a little bit differently? I don't know. Again, this film received a pretty high score because I love that clone storyline, but that romance stuff, yuck. In 6th place at 90% is The Last Jedi. Now, this is one of the main films that I think a majority of Star Wars fans absolutely hate and think ruined everything. I don't. I quite enjoy this movie. As you can see, it received an A- rating. There's a lot of beautiful imagery in this movie, and as an objective thought, I found it to be one of the more original stories that didn't feel utterly copied from either the classic or prequel trilogies. It felt very different, and maybe that's why people didn't really like it. That, and I guess you can say the indifferent Luke Skywalker arc, but again, it is an arc. He has an intrinsic journey to charter throughout the film, and I can respect what he went through. In 5th place, it's top 5. We're looking at Revenge of the Sith at 91%. So once upon a time, Revenge of the Sith was my second favorite Star Wars movie. This film kicked major butt. Lots of great action, potentially the best choreographed lightsaber duel of all time, and the payoff of the transition we've been waiting years to see when Anakin turns to the dark side. There's a lot of love about it, to be honest. In 4th place, at 92%, we're looking at the start of the universe with A New Hope. So this film is so important to talk about because it's the introduction for everything we now know. It's the start of all the movies, TV show, comics, books, everything. Everything that has branched out, it introduced you to a huge, endless universe of possibilities, and nothing about it felt rushed or unbelievable. Instead, it was pure magic. The narrative wasn't perfect, as there seemed to be a 4th act. The plot itself was about basically trying to save the princess, but after they do that, then they add another plot to the mix to destroy the Death Star, which is fine. Most people don't think about it, but I did. In 3rd place, we have our second and final tie between 3 movies, The Force Awakens, The Rise of Skywalker, and The Return of Jedi, all found at 93%. I guess you can say this is where the scores for Star Wars converge and kind of average. We got 2 different trilogy enders in The Rise of Skywalker and The Return of the Jedi, and then The Force Awakens. They were all independently scored different things in each individual scoring category, but when added up, they got to 93%. And at the end of the day, I really do enjoy all of these movies equally, just for different reasons. I personally love Return of the Jedi. I just don't like the Ewoks. I personally love Rise of Skywalker. I just don't like how it sometimes felt aimless. I personally love The Force Awakens. I just didn't like how it copied nearly every plot device from A New Hope. In second place, at a whopping 99%, is Rogue One, a Star Wars story. You can yell at me all you want, but there's something so special that I see in Rogue One. I love the characters, I love the pacing, the darker themes. I love Donnie Yen's character, and I actually love that the opening crawl to A New Hope paved way for this film to exist, and how this film as a whole leads up to A New Hope. I'm personally very much looking forward to the spin-off of Disney+, so sue me. In first place, at a perfect 100% score, is The Empire Strikes Back. Coming back around to where most people will agree with me, we have The Empire Strikes Back, which ticked all the right boxes when I went back and rescored it. There's just so much to love about it. The buildup of the tension, the pacing, the emotionally driven lightsaber duel between Luke and Vader, the revelation that shook crowds across the world. I couldn't tell you a single fault that I found with the film. To me, it's one of the very few films I've ever rated a perfect score. That's all the individual movies ranked, but let's go ahead and rank each trilogy from worst to best. In third place, otherwise known as last place, is the prequel trilogy at 83%. Again, 83% is not a bad score, not in the least bit. And if you look at how I rank every individual prequel film, they just get better and better from worst to best. It's episodes 1, 2, 3. It's just that simple. But at the end of the day, their flashiness and their preference in action over real emotion kept it from being rated higher. It had its moments, don't get me wrong, but there's a clear difference in these trilogies. At second place, at 92%, is the sequel trilogy. My score is probably a whole lot higher than most people's scores for this trilogy, since I actually liked all of these movies, and for most people, they typically just tolerate it. But I think thematically, the series really did bring it back to a simpler format. It stopped being flashy, and it brought it back to a more rudimentary, practical place, and I loved it for that. At first place, of course, is the original trilogy at 95%. Come on, you can't beat it. I could watch the original trilogy on repeat, back to back, because one thing that the original trilogy had that the others didn't was one of the best characters ever seen in cinematic history, not just Star Wars. That's Darth Vader. And that's not as much of an opinion as it is a calculated assessment for what I look for in any character of any movie or story ever. He really is a rarity, but a rarity that I love. Those were my scores for the individual films as well as the trilogies, but what now? Now I tell you which films were the best in each category. Firstly, the people category goes over the acting, characters, casting, importance, chemistry, blah 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 blah, and only 3 of the 11 films got perfect remarks here, and that was The Empire Strikes Back, which will be the top in every category because it's scored 100%. The Force Awakens and Rogue One. Surprisingly, the film that got the worst score in the people category at 7 out of 10 possible stars was A New Hope. The writing category goes over the dialogue, balance of the film, story depth, originality, and how interesting it is. Only one film got perfect remarks, and that was obviously Empire Strikes Back, but in second place at 9 out of 10 stars was Revenge of the Sith, Rogue One, and A New Hope. The worst written film at 5 out of 10 possible stars is The Phantom Menace and Solo, a Star Wars story. Now, when it comes down to BTS, behind the scenes, you're looking at the visuals, cinematography, editing, advertisement, and the music or sound. Half of the Star Wars films got a perfect 10 out of 10 possible star rating. Those are all the films in the sequel trilogy, Rogue One and The Empire Strikes Back. All other films got a score of 9 out of 10. Next up, what is the most entertaining Star Wars film? Hard to say, as 6 of the 11 films got a perfect score, including Rise of the Skywalker, The Force Awakens, A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, Rogue One, and Revenge of the Sith. But I guess you can say the most entertaining in all other areas is definitely Empire Strikes Back, seeing how that's the only movie that got a score of 100%, while everything else didn't. What was the least entertaining? It had a score of 5 out of 10, you're talking about Solo, a Star Wars story. And I want to reiterate the fact that 5 out of 10 means I was perfectly entertained. A score of 10 out of 10 means it blew me away and I won't be able to stop thinking about this movie. And that's all I got. Thanks for sticking with me on all this. I know it was kind of a lengthy video. It always takes me a little bit longer to rank an entire universe of films versus a simple franchise, but let me know what you have to say about Star Wars. Are you a big Star Wars fan? Do you practice the religion of Jedi, or do you think it's all just silly hogwash? Let me know below. As for YouTube, you know what to do. Hit the subscribe button if you like this ranking video and would like to see some more like it. Hit the thumbs up button because that always helps out my channel, and don't forget about the little bell icon because that'll help notify you when I come out with my next ranking video. And until then, peace out!